Good morning, everybody. I'm so excited to share my conversation with Senator Tammy Duckworth this morning with all of you. So, she is the first female wheelchair user, person with a disability, to be elected into the United States Senate. And so, without further ado, let's listen in on that conversation with Tammy Duckworth. Senator Tammy Duckworth, thank you so much. And I really appreciate you for coming on. I know you're homeschooling your daughter, Abigail, right now. So, with it being the pandemic and homeschooling your kids, I was curious how you think the pandemic is affecting people with disabilities and what is being done in terms of medical and financial support.
Well, we have some real issues for people with disabilities. They are losing the support for caregivers, for example, and we fought very hard in the CARES Act that we passed back in the spring and provided for some funding so that people could continue to get home healthcare workers to come in to continue to help them live their independent lives. And right now we need to have passed a new pandemic response package. And in the HEROES Act that passed the House, there is significant dollars in that for caregivers. Unfortunately, Mitch McConnell has not allowed us to vote on that bill, and in the versions that he's put forward, there's been no additional funds. So that will really be very, very difficult on the disability community, especially those who need a little bit of help to live independently. We may, in a worst case scenario, get to a place where people with disabilities will be forced to go back into institutions, and that's not ideal for anyone. And it's certainly something that I don't support. So for me, a priority is to make sure we have those additional funds to help people be able to stay in their own homes. And then beyond that, people are having a really hard time just with the economy, and many of them have lost their jobs. People with disabilities have a very difficult time getting the services that they need, and so this is it's a tragedy on top of a tragedy.
Yeah. So I'm really glad you're aware of that because that is a huge issue. And changing the topic a bit, and you being the first female senator with a disability, being in the U.S. Senate, and you're a wheelchair user like myself. I'm also a manual wheelchair user. I'm just curious, how do you think your presence in Congress has changed the infrastructure and made it easier for future individuals with disabilities to work in Congress?
Well, just exactly as you said, just me being in Congress physically has forced them to modify much of Capitol Hill. Now remember that Congressman Jim Langevin of Rhode Island has been a congressman for quite a while now, and he is also a wheelchair user, although he uses a motorized wheelchair. Because of him, many accommodations had been made, but even so, there was not enough. In many of the buildings in Congress, on Capitol Hill, for example, there might only be one wheelchair accessible restroom per floor, or maybe even in 2 floors. You'd have to go to, you'll see a sign next to a bathroom that says you can't use this bathroom. You have to go to the 3rd floor, east wing, to find a bathroom that's wheelchair accessible. So even those things still need to be modified. The Senate is just now modifying to make the Senate gym wheelchair accessible so that I can actually start using it to exercise. But still to this day, the U.S. Capitol building itself only has one entrance that I can go in and out of, and that entrance is not always staffed. So after hours, sometimes I find myself trapped and unable to leave the building, and I've just taken to just opening the doors anyway and setting off the alarm and have the Capitol Police come running and say, well, this is what happens when you don't make the Capitol wheelchair accessible. And so a lot of those things are works in progress, and I'm working very hard to make sure that as much of the Capitol itself is physically accessible, but it's nowhere near enough. And that's the same story all across our country, as you know.
Yeah, and as you said, being in Congress yourself is such a big representation, and I'm lucky to have, worked in the Senate and met you a couple times. And I was just wondering, when I was in the Senate, the evacuation plans were not really all that thorough. How has it been with you? Do you have do they have a better implementation plan for when emergencies come up, so it's not so haphazard? Or can it be improved?
Well, the evacuation plan can always be improved. Now, for me, of course, there is evacuation chairs and all sorts of things in the in my own offices. But you know, and we've practiced evacuation a few times, but certainly those chairs are not available everywhere that I might possibly go. And it's not like I sit in my office the entire time that I'm at work. I'm actually going between hearing rooms and one place to another. So that has been an issue from time to time. And I do have an aide who travels with me everywhere. So that has been very helpful as well. But again, you know, I'm a United States Senator. I'm not the only person with a disability who uses these buildings and works here. Many other people with disabilities do as well, and they don't have the same accommodations that I do. And even just, you know, regular visitors to the Capitol should be able to get into any of their senators' offices. They should be able to have meetings anywhere they want to. And that simply is not the case right now. And so we must and should do better.
Yeah. And so to jump topics quickly here, I know climate change is also a huge issue that you care about as well. And it also affects people with disabilities in a lot of ways. So how do you think we can better include people with disabilities in climate change conversations and have them be part of the solution plan and help with mitigation plans, you know, not only just be seen as the problem?
Well, you know, I don't think people with disabilities are the problem, right? We are the ones who are going to be the most flexible and the best problem solvers. We've all had to accommodate and be flexible just to live our daily lives. So I think people with disabilities would be uniquely suited to be on any type of a committee or team to address issues, you know, that are really complicated, like climate change, because people with disabilities have learned to think outside the box, to find ways to just be themselves and be productive in the world. And so I would actually think people with disabilities would be much more effective on many of these teams because they can think in a much more creative way. And, you know, to be honest, that's what we're going to need in order to solve the climate crisis. We can't just rely on traditional strategies. We're going to have to be very much neutral on how we get to carbon neutral, for example. So let's figure out how we can get to the goal, set the goal, and then let's be creative about how we get there. And so I do think that it behooves all of us to make sure that people with disability can step forward and be part of any type of a team. And they also bring, you know, I started the Environmental Justice Caucus in the Senate because Black and brown in particular have been the victims of pollution. Oftentimes, you know, it's the effects of toxic pollutants that cause childhood asthma and all sorts of other health conditions. And so everybody needs to be at the table to talk about how we can address these issues that affect all of us. And as COVID-19 has shown, you know, when something like this comes along, if you have a disability or pre-existing, you are more susceptible to many of these illnesses. I just think greater than any team to solve a problem as monumental as the climate crisis is only going to benefit all of us.
What can we do to make it easier for people with disabilities to run for office who may not have the connections or the money to do so?
I've often thought, you know, that an organization or an effort much like what Emily's List has done for women running for office would be something that would be very helpful. In Illinois, we have Off the Sidelines, which is, again, it's a program that Congressman Sherry Bustos started to encourage women to run for office. I think we could do the same thing with the disability community. And it starts off first and foremost with approaching people with disabilities and saying, hey, you should run for office, because they themselves may never have even thought about that possibility. And oftentimes, you know, I'm just sort of pointing out that it is possible. You can do this, and you can be successful, and let's help would be a great thing. So maybe we could talk to some of the disability organizations and you know, think about coming up with training programs to help people who maybe want to run for office, or like yourself, serve on the Hill and be a staff member.
Just to continue on the topic that we ended on, which was, you know, public people with disabilities running for public office, right? And so I was wondering, what plans do you have, either if you already have plans now or in the near future, to help get more people with disabilities elected into either local offices in local elections or into Congress in national elections?
Well, it's also getting elected, but it's also getting them into the pipeline to be staff members as well. Because in many ways, I almost think that the staff members have more power than the elected officials, because they're there and they gain the experience and they can help really write the legislation. So for me, it's really all three. It's both about getting folks elected into local office and in federal office, but then also getting them into the pipeline for staff members. So part of that is I've always had a disability a fellow in my offices, and that is someone that come in and not necessarily work on just disability issues, but just to have someone with a disability work in my offices to help them gain the experience so that they can actually then look at either running for office one day or becoming a full-time staff member, and help them build their resume. I think that's really important. And then also working with the various disability communities. Whenever I hear of anybody who is has a disability and who's running or who's thinking about it, I am more than happy to mentor and work with the various organizations to help them find their way and introduce them to the right people. I think it's important for folks to think about running for office at all different levels, not just a federal level or a statewide level. I mean, you could run for your local library board of trustees, for example. And that is really an important position to be in, because see, the library board of trustees decides what gets what books get banned in our public libraries. And it is something that the very conservative elements have been working very hard on winning these positions so that they can actually ban books and things like that. So don't turn your nose up at even what seems to be the lowest level of office that you can run for.
Yeah, exactly. So any kind of participation, any capacity is very important. And so I was wondering, do you know, you don't have to name names if you're uncomfortable, but do you know of any individuals with disabilities, either in your personal circle or professional circle, that you think would be good for public office positions?
I'm not going to name names, but look, there are so many people out there who are either themselves members of the disability community or are family members of the disability community. And I've talked to many of them and said, hey, you should run for office. And I'm helping some of the others, but they're all over the country. And if anybody that's watching this podcast today is interested, definitely reach out to my offices and we'll help put you in touch with the right people should you decide to run.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's a great resource. So I really encourage people to take up on that offer. So next we're going to jump to employment, which I know you know is a huge issue in the disability world, where around 70% of people with disabilities are unemployed. And so I was wondering, have you hired people with disabilities in your state or DC offices? If not, what ideas do you have to get more people with disabilities employed, either on a more personal circle sphere, as we were talking about in your offices, or on a nationwide kind of influence impact level?
Well, I have multiple staff members with disabilities in my offices, so we're very welcoming, and we actually are very proactive about making sure that everything in our offices are fully not just ADA compliant, but very accessible beyond just being ADA compliant, right? Because ADA compliance is really sort of, for me, the bottom rung of where you should be, and you should be above that. And so what we do need to do is encourage people with disabilities, as they're out there job hunting. One of the things I talk to employers about is that even though people with disabilities have a much higher unemployment number, when they are employed, they are much more loyal employees. You have far less turnover when you hire someone with a disability. They actually stick with you for longer periods of time, and in fact, have much longer longevity and very high productivity when they are employed. And so they actually make very, very good employees, because they're going to be loyal to you. They're going to be very productive. And you're going to have them for a much longer time than you would someone else who tend to, turn over jobs much more quickly. And so that, I think, is something we should actually be sort of promoting. It's not just about, do your part and help hire someone with a disability. It's not about being charitable. It's actually about being good for your business to hire someone with a disability, because they bring benefits with them. in terms of their productivity and in terms of their loyalty and in terms of their longevity. And so we need to sell people with disabilities as employees, not as for lack of a better word, charitable cases, but more as like, hey, you want that person. That person is going to contribute much more than somebody else because they're going to be much more loyal to you. And we need to sell that aspects of people with disabilities.
Exactly. That really needs to be emphasized more. So what I often hear from, federal employers and private companies too, big companies who say they cannot find people with disabilities with the right talents and skills that they're looking for. So that's why they're not able to hire more people with disabilities. So what do you say to that?
I don't think they're looking in the right places, and I don't think they're advertising in the right way. And I think many people, many employers actually inadvertently send out a message of not being welcome to people with disabilities, so that they don't get the applicants. And if they, there's so many organizations that if you were hiring, that you can appeal to and send those job notices to those organizations. You can actually, you can start internship programs within your own businesses to grow your own future employees, and you can recruit from universities and all sorts of other programs to get interns into your offices that are disability interns, so that then they can grow and go on to a full-time position with the company. So I say that they're just not asking or looking in the right places, and that if they were to make the overture to disability organizations and then also university, especially that have major disability programs in Illinois. Southern Illinois University has a significant program for students with disabilities. They would actually get the employees that they're looking for.
Exactly. So I know you have to go. 10 seconds. What are your thoughts on running for president someday? I think that would be amazing.
That is not a fire I have in my belly. I've got a pretty good job. And when you're president for what, 4 years, maybe 8 years, but I could be a senator for a long time and really have a long body of work that I could work on. So it's not something that I've ever thought about doing. I have my dream job, my two dream jobs right now, which are mom first and senator second.
Yeah, wow, that's awesome. Thank you so much. And speaking of mom, I wrote a children's book. It's a person in a wheelchair and talking about different things that we do, and also the theme of public office. So I know you're homeschooling your children, so that might be something you're interested in. Anyways, it's been such a pleasure, Senator Duckworth. I know you're a super busy person, and I will let you go because you are busy, busy, busy. And we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Be well.
Thank you. Did you like this video? If so, share it with your friends and be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want even more resources, be sure to sign up for our email updates on our website, traipsingglobal.com. Keep learning new perspectives, keep being inclusive, because it will make the world a better place for you and for everyone else. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on another episode of the Traipsing Global on Wheels podcast hour.